Where was I? Yes, I ought to be clear about what I'm talking about when I say cuddling strangers. And what I'm really going to be talking about is cuddle workshops, so a facilitated, held space with an emphasis on boundaries and consent, where you will be guided in gradually into optional touch. So, picture of a cuddle workshop. I'm not really going to be talking about free-flow cuddle spaces, the kind of things that you might find at a festival. I'm going to say a little bit about those later on. And I'm really not talking about grabbing passers-by and cuddling them forcibly. And if you were hoping I was, then you probably ought to have a chat with Sian Johnson about the Wheel of Consent a bit later on. When Ali first spoke to me about talking about cuddles, I thought, well, I could do, but my talk is going to go, cuddles are nice, cuddles are good for you, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And I do have a bit more to say than that, but it is probably worth starting off with why cuddles are nice and are good for you. And I'll go through these quite quickly. You'll probably be familiar with most of these, so I don't want to dwell on them for too long. Oxytocin is the obvious place to start. They're love hormones, kind of essential for bonding and connection. How long do we need to be in contact with somebody else before we start getting a decent release of oxytocin?
20 seconds.
Indeed so, which is significantly longer. Actually, interestingly, random AI sidebar, if you put that into Google, the AI says 6 seconds. It's like, no, it's not. Anyway, this is significantly longer than a socially acceptable hug in our culture, which means for an awful lot of people, an awful lot of the time, actually, they're not really getting very much oxytocin, and that's really quite a significant issue. The other 3 of the 4 happy brain chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, there's evidence that all of these are released during cuddling. Nervous system co-regulation. Most of us are familiar with nervous system regulation these days, but I'm quite often asked, well, what does co-regulation mean? And co-regulation is basically, I'm helping to regulate your nervous system while you are helping to regulate mine. I'm soothing your nervous system as you are soothing mine. It's really an important aspect of cuddling and an important aspect of cuddle workshops. And then the most obvious one, unmyelinated C-tactile afferents. It's not perhaps going to come as a surprise. I'm kind of showing off a bit here. I only found out about these recently, and I had to look up the technical name for these. Does anybody know what these are? Yeah. Oh, all right, I'll tell you, even though you're nodding. Right, these are great. These are skin receptors that we have, everybody has. They only respond to touch that is at 32 degrees centigrade and moving at 3 centimeters a second, which is incredibly specific. Hotter, colder, faster, slower, not interested. That speed. It is the temperature of a human hand and the speed with which we instinctively caress a baby's face to calm it down. And those skin receptors are really important for lowering stress, reducing blood pressure, and a whole range of other important things. And my point is that we are absolutely hardwired for touch. It is essential to our health and well-being. But that still does rather beg the question, why strangers? And people quite often ask me this about cuddle workshops. They say, well, what's that for? And then they go, oh, it must be really good if you're not in a relationship. Quite often with this kind of vibe. And if you leave the sort of patronising out of it for a minute, they're not wrong. It is really good for you if you're not in a relationship, because if you're not getting that kind of touch anywhere else, then a cuddle workshop is a really great place to get it. And it's also a really good thing if you are then going to be moving into a relationship, because that way you don't move into a relationship from a place of lack. Ilara from Pathways once described this to me as going into a relationship with an oxytocin begging bowl. A little bit like Oliver Twist here. More. Because if we're not getting all those good things that I mentioned earlier on, then we can become desperate for them. And desperate people do not make for heartfelt consent. Getting our bowl filled up is really important for us to enter into a relationship without having overly porous or overly rigid boundaries. Okay, great. So what about if we are in a relationship? People often say to me they have plenty of cuddles in their life, partner, children, pets, friends, And this is fabulous. I celebrate that. It's fantastic that people have got lots of touch in their life. I could not survive without the friends with whom I have significant cuddle relationships. You know who you are, I love you, and I appreciate you. But it is different from a cuddle workshop. Let's have a look at some of these things bit by bit. Parent-child cuddles first. Absolutely delightful. There is a deep joy to be had from cuddling one's own children. There's a deep joy to be had from cuddling one's own children. And I'm particularly sad there's not a baby to cuddle here this evening, but never mind. It is an asymmetric relationship. It's a nurturing relationship. We nurture, but we are not nurtured in turn. And it's really important for our well-being that we have that reciprocity. But there are other issues with peers, like this. This is what I refer to as relationship noise. The constant hum of issues, whatever they may be. Bins, decorating, tax, childcare, cooking, whatever. With our partner or our cuddle buddy or our siblings, whatever it is. Because this bit of us can be really difficult to switch off. And honestly, how often do we actually say to our partners or our friends, we could just do with an hour plus of cuddling to sink into deep nervous system regulation? I mean, we can, and maybe we do, but it's not common. Which brings us to another issue. This is a sex lectures talk. I should warn you that in this sex lectures talk, this is about the only reference to sex you're going to get. But how often when we are cuddling somebody, are we thinking about whether or not it might turn into sex? Or are we concerned about whether the other person wants it or expect it? Do I want to or expect it? And what am I going to do to manage that? And it can be true with partners, it can be true with cuddle buddies. It can be one of the reasons, I think, why sometimes siblings and friends can feel like this is a bit weird that you might want to cuddle me, because that association with sex is so ingrained in our culture. And it's maybe worth saying as well that if our only source of all those lovely cuddles and all those good things that I was mentioning earlier is a sexual partner, then we can become anxious about losing that single source, and that anxiety, again, is bad for boundaries and consent. The idea here is that we disconnect our most basic touch needs from sex, and to normalise getting our cuddle needs met in the same way we might go to the gym. Hence, gym picture. See what I did there? Ishana Spears, who trained me to run cuddle workshops, talks about the descent over the course of a workshop. This describes the process by which participants gradually sink deeper and deeper into nervous system regulation. It's partly a switching off of our default vigilance as we gradually feel safer in the space. And one of the reasons that free-flow spaces are different is that, in my experience, the absence of a facilitator means that people don't sink as deep because there needs to be that extra bit of vigilance around what's going on. In fact, my experience of those workshops is that they tend to be upregulated, a bit chatty and a bit giggly because it's all quite exciting. I mean, it's lovely, it's fun, I have enjoyed them, but it's really not the same as going deep. People come to facilitated workshops because the held experience can be qualitatively different from other cuddles and aims to get you to that deeper place. That we might cuddle strangers is a coincidence of a held public space. But there is another reason why it is, in my own opinion, actively good for us to cuddle people we don't know. And to illustrate this, I'm going to tell you a story about my experience. This is the training that I went to with Ishana Spears. And to get here, I had to get the train from Merseyside to London. I was late. It was a very hot day. I nearly missed my train. It was all very fraught. I grabbed a sandwich, which turned out to be deeply unsatisfactory, dashed onto the train, which then stayed in the station for an hour with no air conditioning. When it finally left, it still had to go slowly because whatever was causing the problem further down the line was still being dealt with. So I alternated between being anxious that I was going to be too late to attend the training and anxious that I was going to turn up and be too sweaty and dysregulated to really kind of sink into it. I arrived at Euston Concourse. I don't know how familiar you are with Euston Station Concourse. It can be a challenging place at the best of times. And when I arrived, it felt like a Hieronymus Bosch hellscape. This is an actual picture of my experience. Have I got a laser pen here? Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, you can just see the escalators here bringing people up from the tube. I managed to get through it, but it felt like a very adversarial experience. I got to the training in time, started with a cuddle workshop, full cuddle workshop, led by the delightful Ashana. There she is. A number of you know Ashana. If you ever have the chance to be in Ashana space, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It is delightful. I have a lovely time. I go to stay with my friend. I leave later in the evening. The trains are mercifully uncrowded. All is well. The next day, I have to go back, this time using the tube at rush hour. But my experience could not be more different. I am positively beatific. I am surrounded on all sides by lovely humans. Everything that everybody is doing is lovely, whether they are ambling along with a cup of coffee, sprinting down escalators, running onto trains, avoiding catching each other's eyes on the tube, whatever it is, they're great. And it's not just because I'm blissed out on oxytocin, but that is part of it, to be fair. But it's because I had got into that profoundly deep space by establishing connection with people I had mostly never met. And this fundamentally shifted how I related to the other strangers that I encountered. It made me see the good in them and be generally kinder and more understanding and tolerant. And they, in their turn, were nicer to me. And everybody had a slightly better day. Sorry, I'm just going to check my notes here. I have a PowerPoint here with my notes on, and I can't read them. There's too many of them. The slide's too long. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Oh yeah, that was it. This is nice. Would have been good if it had just run on smoothly, but never mind. In my experience, the outward-facing nature of cuddling, panicking now, I'm going to read it. The outward nature of facing cuddling people you don't know creates a very different experience than the inward-facing experience of cuddling those closest to you. Which brings me to the final aspect of a cuddle workshop that is different from cuddling a friend or a partner. It is a collective experience that may, if we wish, lead to cuddling together with multiple people at the same time. We regulate not only our own nervous systems, but the group nervous system, and build that sense of connectedness beyond the individual. And also, maybe, over time, it might be possible to build a community where we can regularly meet these needs for each other, welcoming those we know and strangers equally, looking inwards at our established relationships and outwards to the rest of the world at the same time. If you haven't done this before, or if you have, and you feel you'd like to, there are quite a lot of us in the network founded by Ashana, so these are all the people who've been trained by Ashana. Not everybody is running workshops. In the Northwest, I am there, in Merseyside and Leeds. Derek is in Leeds, and Becca and Raquel. Hi, Derek. Becca and Raquel are over in Yorkshire. I should also mention outside the network, John and Ilara run cuddle workshops at Pathways in Salford. And I ought to mention Anna Fortes down in London as well, because she's been running cuddle workshops in the UK longer than anybody else. This is me, Shining Helix Cuddle Community. I've got a Facebook page, which you can find if you look for Shining Helix Cuddle Community. It's relatively limited. It's my only public-facing presence, but I post my events on there. I mostly run things through a WhatsApp group, which you can join if you want. The number's there. And those are my upcoming workshops. If you do come, expectation management, I cannot promise you a Zen-like transformation. It's not always like that. But I am fairly safe, I think, to say that it will be nice and it will be good for you. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.